Hollywood called her a star, but Judy Garland was a prisoner of fame. While fans adored her as the girl next door, her reality was all pills, pressure, and pain. The price of her rise? A brutal fall. Young Judy and the Hollywood machine. At just 13, Judy Garland entered Hollywood, but the reality was a far cry from a starry-eyed dream. Born Frances Ethel Gumm, Judy had been performing on the vaudeville circuit with her sisters since she was only 2. Even then, her natural talent stood out, especially her voice, a powerhouse that could captivate anyone listening. MGM noticed this remarkable quality, and by 13, she was signed with the studio, marking the beginning of her journey as one of Hollywood's youngest stars. But that journey was heavily shaped and controlled by the Hollywood machine. Her mother, Ethel, had pushed Judy into the industry, not as an act of parental pride, but out of a relentless pursuit of fame and financial stability. Ethel was what many would call a classic stage mom. Once Judy was signed, MGM executives wasted no time establishing a strict set of rules and demands. Judy didn't fit Hollywood's typical image of beauty. She wasn't blonde, nor did she have the hourglass figure or statuesque presence favored by MGM, and the studio didn't hesitate to remind her of that, often harshly. In their eyes, her natural looks were a problem to be fixed. MGM forced Judy to wear caps on her teeth, giving her an ideal Hollywood smile. They even went as far as making her wear a rubber disc in her nose to alter its shape. These physical modifications were uncomfortable, but what they did to her diet was even worse. MGM placed Judy on a highly restricted diet, sometimes just chicken soup and black coffee, and then came the pills. To ensure she could handle the demands of long, exhausting days, MGM gave her pep pills for energy and barbiturates to sleep at night. By her mid-teens, Judy was already dependent on this brutal cycle of pills, a routine that would ultimately take a lifelong toll on her health. Yet, despite everything, she delivered flawless performances. Her charm and presence on screen kept audiences captivated and profits flowing for MGM. But to them, Judy was more a product than a person. The studio's treatment of her as an ugly duckling who needed constant modification only worsened her insecurities. This relentless control foreshadowed the internal battles Judy would face throughout her life, with her mental health slowly eroded by Hollywood's unforgiving demands. The breakthrough with Dorothy and a dark reality. When Judy Garland was cast as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, she was only 16. This was the role that would make her a household name worldwide, but few knew the nightmare behind the scenes. MGM ramped up their control over her appearance for this film, putting her on even stricter diet restrictions and forcing her to wear a binding corset to appear younger. Although she was already naturally slim, they wanted her to look childlike, squeezing her into a physical mold that mirrored their ideal image of Dorothy. But it wasn't just the physical demands that were intense. The filming schedule was brutal, requiring Judy to work up to 18 hours a day. MGM continued to control her with amphetamines to keep her awake and barbiturates to knock her out after the exhausting days. It became a routine, one that kept her functioning like a machine even as her health and well-being suffered. Her role as Dorothy was a monumental success, launching her career into stardom, but it was built on a toxic foundation of Hollywood exploitation. Executives belittled her looks and reminded her that her talent was her only redeeming quality. On set, Judy endured insults and constant scrutiny, an environment where she never felt truly valued for who she was. She was beginning to feel the pressure and the internalized insecurity that came with constant criticism. The world saw a sweet, wholesome girl singing about rainbows, but behind the scenes, Judy's mental health was deteriorating. This movie should have been her crowning achievement, but it only deepened her struggles, creating a bittersweet association with her most iconic role. In some ways, The Wizard of Oz marked the height of her career, but it also became the starting point for a lifetime of struggles that would haunt her beyond the yellow brick road. Love and loss, the early relationships. Amid Hollywood's relentless demands, Judy Garland craved a sense of stability and belonging. At just 19, she married composer David Rose, hoping that love might offer some reprieve from her chaotic life. The young couple's romance was Judy's attempt at a personal life, a world away from studio lights and scripts. But MGM had other ideas. The studio saw her marriage as a distraction, something that would pull her away from her obligations as a rising star. MGM executives wasted no time interfering, deeming her personal happiness a threat to her career. When Judy discovered she was pregnant, she was overjoyed, seeing it as an opportunity to embrace a more grounded life. But MGM had the final word. They pressured her into terminating the pregnancy, insisting that a baby would ruin her image and sidetrack her career. For Judy, this was a heart-wrenching decision, one she would never fully recover from. It left her with a deep sense of loss and heartbreak, as well as a lingering resentment toward the studio that continued to control every aspect of her life. Unsurprisingly, her marriage to Rose began to unravel under the weight of Hollywood's interference and Judy's own emotional scars. What started as an escape from her career's pressures soon became entangled in them. After her divorce from Rose, Judy found love again with director Vincente Minnelli, who seemed to offer a fresh sense of understanding and companionship. Their relationship was, at first, a balm to her wounds, and she found some happiness with Minnelli. Together, they had a daughter, Liza Minnelli, and for a brief period, Judy believed she had finally found the stability she yearned for. But her battles were far from over. Despite Minnelli's support, Judy's addiction to pills was worsening. No longer regulated by MGM, her use of medication became more chaotic as she tried to manage both her career and the emotional toll of her personal life. The stresses of Hollywood didn't disappear, they continued to haunt her, and soon even her relationship with Minnelli became strained under the weight of her struggles. Her need for love and stability rather than bringing her peace only seemed to add layers of complexity and heartbreak to her life. These early relationships revealed a tragic pattern. Each time Judy reached for happiness outside Hollywood's grip, it seemed to slip further from her grasp. Her addiction worsened, and her self-worth, already fragile, continued to fracture. The very industry that had made her famous was, paradoxically, intensifying her pain, pushing her deeper into a cycle of dependency and despair. The MGM Decline and her first nervous breakdown. By the 1940s, Judy Garland was MGM's golden girl, a money machine with a face every fan recognized. But behind the scenes, the relentless schedule and endless cycle of pills were taking a toll. Her pep pills to stay awake, sleeping pills to come down. She was barely holding it together. The studio's grip was slipping and Judy was on the edge. Then came The Pirate in 1947. This was supposed to be a light-hearted musical with Gene Kelly, but it turned into a nightmare. The pressure was brutal, with intense dance numbers, long shooting days, and MGM breathing down her neck. One day she couldn't take it anymore and broke down on set, right in front of everyone. Judy's first public nervous breakdown forced production to a halt, and the cracks in her perfect star persona were on full display. MGM's response? They packed her off to a sanitarium, calling it exhaustion. A bit of R&R, and they expected she'd be back in shape. But when she returned, Judy wasn't fixed. She began missing more work, showing up late and struggling to keep up with MGM's demands. The studio finally lost patience. After years of shaping, controlling, and profiting off her every move, MGM decided she was no longer worth the trouble and dropped her. Just like that, Judy Garland, their shining star, was out. For Judy, this was more than a job loss. MGM had been her entire life since she was a teenager. Her identity, her security, and yes, her prison. Now, she was truly on her own. No studio contract, no protection, no steady income. This newfound freedom left her spinning. Without MGM's structure, she felt lost, and the lack of support only deepened her addictions and insecurities. Left to fend for herself in a world that quickly forgot, Judy sank into despair. At her lowest, she attempted to end her own life. A devastating cry from a woman who'd been built up and abandoned by the very system that created her. MGM had made her famous, controlled her every move, and then discarded her. They left her to pick up the pieces alone. Struggling for a comeback, Judy Garland may have been let go by MGM, but she was far from done. Determined to show the world she was still a star, she launched a comeback through a series of concert tours. Her live performances were nothing short of electrifying, each show packed with raw emotion and vulnerability. Audiences saw a different Judy, one who connected with them deeply. Perhaps because her struggles were so visibly etched into her performances, she poured her heart out on stage, and the response was overwhelming. This comeback wasn't just about career revival, it was about survival. Judy needed to prove to herself and the world that she was more than the Hollywood machine that had chewed her up and spit her out. Her shows sold out, and she was lauded for her talent and resilience. But the comeback also came at a high personal cost. The relentless touring schedule was grueling, reigniting her dependency on pills to manage the demands of life on the road. Despite the emotional high of these successful performances, the pressures began to mount. Judy was exhausted, financially unstable, and relying on substances to keep going. Her audience may have adored her, but behind the scenes, she was struggling more than ever. She was living a double life, the triumphant star on stage and the fragile, overwhelmed woman behind the scenes. By the end of her tour, Judy was back where she started, struggling to balance her talent with her personal demons. The comeback had given her a taste of the spotlight again, but it also exposed her vulnerabilities. Without the protection of a studio or consistent support, she was left to handle the highs and lows on her own. The brief taste of success was bittersweet. Her fame was both a blessing and a curse. The A Star is Born revival. In 1954, Judy Garland's career got a much-needed second wind with A Star is Born. This was her big chance to show Hollywood and herself that she still had the magic. The role of Vicki Lester seemed tailor-made for Judy, a character who also goes through the highs and lows of show business. It was her first major film after leaving MGM, and with her husband Sid Luft producing, there was hope that this movie would re-establish her as a Hollywood powerhouse. Her performance was nothing short of extraordinary. Audiences and critics alike were blown away by her raw, powerful portrayal, and the movie was an instant classic. Judy's rendition of songs like The Man That Got Away captivated audiences and reminded everyone of her unparalleled talent. It was a triumphant return to the big screen, and her role earned her an Academy Award nomination. Many believed this was her moment, her chance to finally gain Hollywood's full respect. But behind the scenes, the production was chaotic. Judy's struggles with addiction were still present, affecting her punctuality and energy on set. The film's budget and schedule ballooned as a result, and studio executives grew anxious. Despite her captivating performance, her personal battles were impossible to ignore. When Oscar night arrived, Judy watched from her hospital bed after giving birth to her son, Joey. She was the favorite to win, but the award went to Grace Kelly. Judy was devastated. After pouring her soul into this comeback, Hollywood once again left her empty-handed. Although A Star is Born was a monumental achievement, the heartbreak of losing the Oscar was a bitter reminder of the obstacles that seemed to follow her: financial ruin and failed marriages. As the 1960s rolled in, Judy's life took another dramatic turn, marked by failed relationships and mounting financial troubles. After the success of A Star is Born, Judy had hoped for stability, but instead, her personal life began to unravel. Her marriage to Sid Luft, her third husband and father of her children, was crumbling. Luft had played a major role in reviving her career, but their relationship was tumultuous. His gambling habits put a strain on their finances, and as Judy's struggles with addiction worsened, the marriage became increasingly toxic. Their divorce was messy, and Judy was left nearly penniless. Years of poor financial management and costly divorces left her in significant debt. Despite her success, she found herself borrowing money just to stay afloat. This financial instability was deeply humiliating for Judy, a woman who had once been the darling of MGM and Hollywood royalty. Desperate for income, Judy began taking any gig that came her way. She performed at nightclubs, TV appearances, and anywhere else that would pay, often for much less than she deserved. The once glamorous star was now doing small-time shows, sometimes to half-empty venues. It was a stark contrast to the packed concert halls of her earlier comeback tour, and it deeply affected her morale. The combination of financial stress and her inability to find a stable, loving relationship sent Judy into a downward spiral. Her dependency on pills was more severe than ever, and she struggled with depression. Each attempt at rebuilding her life seemed to end in heartbreak or disappointment, leading her to a place of despair. The world saw a fading star, but for Judy, it felt like the life she had worked so hard for was slipping further out of reach. As the years went by, her resilience was wearing thin, and the promise of a comeback seemed more elusive than ever. The London years and health decline. In the late 1960s, Judy moved to London, hoping that a change of scenery might offer a fresh start. London held the allure of a different audience, one that still admired her talents, and Judy hoped to re-establish herself there. She performed at various nightclubs and theaters across the city, but her health was deteriorating rapidly. Years of substance abuse had weakened her physically, and her mental health was in decline. Her life in London was marked by a series of troubling incidents that were highly publicized by the British tabloids. At this point, her performances were inconsistent. Some nights, she delivered incredible shows reminiscent of her early years, while other nights, she arrived late or appeared visibly impaired on stage. Audiences were often sympathetic, but some grew frustrated, and her reputation suffered further. Judy's living situation in London was also less than glamorous. No longer able to afford the lifestyle of a Hollywood star, she was living in small, rented accommodations, often under financial strain. Her interactions with fans and the press became increasingly erratic, and it was clear she was struggling. Without the consistent support of close family or friends, Judy was isolated and vulnerable. In this bleak period, she relied on nightclubs as her main source of income, even though performing under such challenging circumstances was taking a serious toll on her health. She faced one health setback after another, with her weakened body barely keeping up with the demands of the performances. The London years marked a tragic decline for Judy Garland as she struggled to hold on to a career that had once defined her. Yet, despite everything, she continued to perform, clinging to the stage as her last connection to the life she once knew. The mother behind the star, Judy's relationships with her children. As Judy's world unraveled, there was one role she never stopped caring about: being a mother. For her 3 kids, Liza, Lorna, and Joey, life with Judy Garland wasn't Hollywood glamour. It was a balancing act between love, chaos, and heartache. Her final years were marked by declining health and career setbacks, but through it all, her children were a source of both comfort and concern. Liza Minnelli, her eldest, was the closest to her mother's star-studded yet stormy life. She grew up backstage, watching Judy shine on stage and struggle backstage. Liza wasn't just a daughter, she was Judy's confidant, witnessing the ups and downs that the public never saw. While audiences saw Judy the star, Liza saw her mom at her most vulnerable. Later, she'd recall how she often felt like the adult in the relationship, comforting her mother when the spotlight faded and the pressures hit hard. Then there was Lorna, her second child, who quickly learned that life with Judy was anything but stable. While other kids her age were playing outside, Lorna was often looking out for her mom. She'd hide pills, try to keep her mom steady, and do whatever she could to hold her family together. And Joey, her youngest, had memories of a mother who adored him but was often battling her own demons. For Judy's kids, family life wasn't the dream people imagined. It was a constant tug-of-war between Judy's love for them and her fight with addiction and exhaustion. Despite it all, Judy's love for her kids shone through. She may have been crumbling, but she cared deeply, even if her struggles sometimes overshadowed her intentions. Her children had to grow up fast, learning to navigate both her fame and her flaws. And as Judy's health declined and the stage lights dimmed, they were there, witnessing the final chapters of her story with a mix of love, worry, and resilience. Judy was a legend to the world, but to her kids, she was just Mom. Complex, captivating, and even in her darkest moments, deeply loved. A brief marriage and tragic end. In 1969, Judy Garland married her fifth husband, musician Mickey Deans. The marriage was turbulent from the beginning. Deans was younger, and while he may have cared for Judy, he was often overwhelmed by her ongoing struggles with addiction and poor health. Their life together in London was marked by frequent arguments and instability, a reflection of Judy's own chaotic life. At this point, Judy's physical and mental health had deteriorated to such a degree that even daily routines were a struggle. She was performing less frequently, and her financial troubles persisted. Friends and fans noticed how fragile she had become, and there was a general sense of worry about her well-being. Despite her tragic situation, Judy's spirit endured. She continued to fight, even if only for brief moments of happiness. But on June 22, 1969, the world was shocked by the news of her death. Judy Garland was found in the bathroom of her London apartment, dead at just 47 years old. The official cause was an accidental overdose, but many suspected that her body had simply given out after years of abuse. The Hollywood star, once beloved by millions, had died alone and struggling, proof of the brutal toll fame had taken on her life. The news rocked fans around the world, sparking a wave of mourning. The world lost Judy Garland, but her story was far from over.